As children, we're taught about scary animals. They're more afraid of us than we are of them. But some of them will eat 1,000 of you in one sitting. This is the story of Ramree Island. Thanks for watching Informal History. My name's Adam. We break down broad subjects into smaller ones so that everyone can understand and enjoy. Saltwater crocodiles are some of the biggest reptiles on the planet. You can find them in Africa, but you can also find them in Asia, many parts, especially in the South Pacific. Saltwater crocodiles that are found in Asia can be well over 20 feet long, and they can also weigh almost a ton, or sometimes, in rare circumstances, well over a ton. And these animals will eat everything in their sight: deer, turtles, other mammals like monkeys, other reptiles, smaller crocodiles sometimes. If it fits in their mouth, they will go ahead and eat it. And these animals are not hunters in the way that you'd see a cat on the prowl. They're opportunistic hunters, which means they will sit and wait. And when something comes close enough, they will snap their jaws and they will devour it. Keep in mind, these animals can go a long time without food, and the bigger they are, the longer they can go. But the longer they go, the hungrier they get, the riskier they will become, and the more food they will eat in one sitting. Some of these massive reptiles can go up to a year without food, and sometimes maybe even a little bit longer. The big difference is, unlike most reptiles, even the biggest snakes, these animals don't shy away from humans. If they see a human in their grasp and they can get to it, they don't run away like most snakes would, like all monitor lizards would. These animals see us as prey just like they'd see any other mammal. Keep in mind, we aren't their preferred meal, but these guys are opportunistic. They're not really that picky. As a backstory of Ramree Island, this is during World War II, and part of the Axis was the Imperial Japanese Army, which at the time, armed with bayonets and rifles, they were almost invincible with their sheer numbers but small stature. The average Japanese soldier in World War II was a little bit over 5'3" and about 150 pounds or less. So these soldiers could eat basically a handful of rice a day and then whatever they could find where they were stationed. And during World War II, the Japanese were set to conquer a lot of places in the southeast of Asia. And in their sights was a place called Burma, which is right beside India. And eventually, to make a long story short, they retreated to one island off the coast, with a little strait in between the mainland and this island called Ramree Island. And on this island, for an extended period of time, the Japanese were starting to wipe out all of the wildlife so they could eat it. Keep in mind, they only have a little bit of rice sent with them and some other provisions, but most of the protein that they were to get was going to be from mammals and reptiles that they found on the island. So this depletes the food sources for all the native population of animals. To be noted is there was over 1,000 men, and this was a small island. In January 1945, British troops launched Operation Matador. This operation was to recoup a whole bunch of islands in the South Pacific that were Japanese infiltrated and then captured by the Japanese. The idea was to establish air bases and then further their goals in the war. The British battleship Queen Elizabeth II launched a naval attack, and then the Brits bombed the heck by plane over Ramree Island where the Japanese were stationed. And then the Allied forces started an amphibious attack where they started to send men on shore from boats. The Japanese were severely outmanned and outgunned, and as there was casualties and many of the men were already sick or injured, they had no choice but to retreat. The idea was to head into the hills. The problem was, as they started to retreat, they realized that they were being flanked and British forces were almost on all sides. So the Japanese commander made a fatal error. He commanded 900 of his troops to go through a mangrove swamp 10 miles long so that they could get to the other side of the island where there were other Japanese forces waiting that could help them out. Asian mangrove swamps are infested with, well, the things that live there. Venomous scorpions, lots of venomous elapids, and venomous vipers as well. On top of that, the water isn't the cleanest, and buzzing around you all the time are mosquitoes that carried infectious disease. And keep in mind, if you were infected with malaria or other things during this time, you're probably not getting better. Oh, and also, saltwater crocs were ever present in these mangroves. Just as a backstory, because of these soldiers wiping out most of the population of what the crocodiles would be eating, these crocodiles eventually went into a state of dormancy. There was very little food, but crocodiles can go a long time without food. And part of the way that they do this is they slow down their metabolism and slow down their system. Not to a hibernation like bears do, or even a true brumation like a lot of reptiles do, but just slow down, sit, and wait, and as soon as there's a food available, they will snatch it up and eat it. So as these soldiers were being pushed into the mangroves, guess what was waiting? These crocodiles, which were much more hungry than usual, much more risky, and were not going to waste an opportunity to eat whatever it was that came their way. And over the next few days, soldiers, especially at the beginning, the sick ones, the slow ones, the ones that couldn't get around, started to be bitten and drown, and then their limbs torn off by these crocodiles. And as the screams and the thrashing started, it brought in more crocodiles to the area. So imagine yourself, a sick Japanese soldier going through these dark mangroves that were almost impenetrable. It wasn't like there was a path, you're forging your own way, and the only animal that knows their way better than you is all of them, including these crocodiles. One by one, these sick soldiers made a meal for these crocodiles, and because they were hungry and because they were aggressive, they had no problem biting onto the same man if it was 2 or 3 of these crocodiles. And once a crocodile gets a hold of a prey item and rips them down below the water where they start to drown, they start to death roll, and your body can't move as fast as whatever piece of flesh they're holding onto, which means that piece of flesh goes into the throat of that crocodile and away from you. Eventually, of the 900 men that started to retreat, it is estimated that only 20 of them survived and 13 of them were taken captive by the Allies. The only way we know or can guesstimate what actually happened was by the stories of those who were captured by the British and Allied forces. A lot of the soldiers recounted the 2 or 3 evenings where they were going through the mangroves, watching their comrades being eaten by these giant crocodiles. Some estimated that 500 soldiers or so died in the mangroves, all of them by crocodiles, maybe, probably not. Realistically, what probably happened, although this is a fantastic tale, for sure, some of these men were eaten by crocodiles. There's no doubt about it. But a crocodile who's got a hold of a man really can't go after another man very quickly. So it's likely that most men that were in these mangroves weren't killed by crocodiles, but by something else. What's interesting is these crocodiles can live over 100 years, so it is likely that some of the crocodiles that are left in this area, of which there are very few, are probably the same ones who were eating people during this time in 1945. But unfortunately, there are almost no saltwater crocodiles left on Ramree Island because of hunting in the 1960s that was unregulated, and by the 1980s, there was basically none of them left. Are there still some lurking in the mangroves? Absolutely. And in the strait between the mainland and the island as well. So, was the theory of 1,000 men being eaten by crocodiles in one night true? Sort of, but not really. Definitely dozens or maybe hundreds of men were eaten by crocodiles in a small span, and it was because of war efforts by the Allies forcing the Japanese soldiers to retreat through mangroves. How many were there? We'll never know. Let me know in the comment section below what videos you want to see from Informal History. Because we do videos every weekend, that means I'll see you in the next one.